Everyone, welcome back. Now you might notice from my attire that I'm wearing exactly what I was wearing when we finished the last video. That's because we're only about an hour further on. This was an extra bit, but the other video was getting long, so I thought I'd put it in this first one. What we're going to look at today is the front brake. The back brake's no problem, being drum brake. We just need to make up a torque arm, and that's that sorted. Most of the work for the back brake is actually going to be involved in making the rear sets so that we have the brake pedal and the actuated rod and everything. But just after I'd finished on the last one, when we'd got this in, I got this all bolted in, and when I had the nice big brace and everything, and so the forks were held exactly as they should be, I found that there was actually a space. The hub is slightly narrower than the forks are. So what I did was, this part that stuck out here, I turned that down all the way so that I could push it right up against the hub and have the wheel float in here. And then I got it centered, and I centered it by making sure that it was equidistant on both sides from the inside of the fork to the rim, again with my little pair of, where are they? Good old school inside calipers. So when I got it set up, I was able to measure the gap, and I found that it was 140 thou. So I've made up a little spacer, so now this is in exactly right, so we're all set to go with the brake. You may notice I've swapped it over as well. I don't know, British bikes tend to have the brake on the right hand side, so I put it on there. Whether we're going to have twin disc brakes, I don't know yet. So anyway, let's get down to what we're going to do. Alright, oh, one interesting thing as well, when I was looking for some information in the manual that I have for the KZ1100, because I did have one of those, I come across a little addendum in the back for the, I think it's the VN or the ZN, which was like the custom version of this, and that's got these forks with this different fork stay. So I had the information all the time. There you go. So the reason we're going to have a whole video on the front brake is because matching up the Yamaha XS650 to these Kawasaki forks, of course, we've come across a couple of problems. First one is the Yamaha disc, well, this one anyway, which was the single disc setup, the older style with a bolt-on disc onto like a web in the centre. The later ones apparently were a one-piece one, which we're going to take into account shortly. This is 11.7 inches, but the disc for the Kawasaki is 10.4, so consequently when I try to put the caliper on, it's not going on, because obviously it's right out here and it should be in there somewhere. So we're going to have to turn down the disc. Stainless steel, so we'll be looking at sort of machining of stainless steel. The other thing is, this bolts on this bracket here on two mountings. You'll see all this when I come in closer on. The disc is further over than the Kawasaki one must be, because the caliper won't go in. So what I'm going to have to do is machine off a little bit of the mountings. Actually, you can probably see them that side. Machine off a little bit of these two mountings. Unfortunately, these aren't solid to the fork all the way through, if you follow me. They actually stick out a good bit, so I can take some off without having any danger of coming close to machining the fork leg, if you follow what I mean. So, I'm going to take this wheel out because I played around a little bit and I want to show you what I was thinking of and how I got to where I am now. So let me take the wheel out. Here's the wheel taken apart. Now there's a basic hub, it's got some inserts for the web to bolt to. Then that goes on there with 6 bolts, and then the disc goes on there. So as I say, it's too far out this way. So my first thought was, okay, let me take this off right, and mount this on the back. Put it on like that. Well, that was too far in, so that didn't work. Then the next thought was, I don't know if the light catches it, you can see there's actually a recess here. This is, so I don't know, 1/4 of an inch or so thick, and then there's not quite, probably on a 1/16 of an inch recess. So I then thought, okay, let's put it in that way and put it on there, and that was pretty good. Although I did notice now the bolt heads stick out slightly, which might be a problem. And also, one of the things here is the bolt heads go right up against this inner part, so that sort of locks them in. But more than that, I thought to myself, this is the old disc setup. The newer discs, of which obviously there are a lot more around, are one-piece disc. So if I start messing around with where this sits on the wheel, then if ever another owner needs to get another disc, or if I'm going to put 2 discs on, it's going to be a lot easier to find a one-piece disc than it is the 2-piece one. So we're going to go with leaving it on like that, and I'll make the adjustment to the way the caliper fits on. So our first job is to turn this from 11.7 down to 10.4. which is going to be about that much off. Let me get the caliper. I've ordered new pads for this, but they haven't arrived yet. So the caliper has still got plenty of space to go on. There's going to be plenty of pad on the disc. We're going to have exactly the same pad to disc area. Admittedly, it's going to be a little bit closer in, so there's going to be some differences in the braking effort, but that might be one of the reasons why we'll go to 2 discs, because the even with the XS650, apparently they had a smaller disc when they went to the 2 disc setup. So we shall see. As we mentioned, it's all trial and error. Who knows, before we finish we might have to ditch this wheel completely. But anyway, for the moment, what we're going to do is turn this down first and see if the caliper goes on nicely, because if it doesn't, then the whole thing is moot and we've got to think of something else. So let's mount this, and what we're going to do in the lathe as well, we're going to mount this in the lathe. Rather than turning it, although I don't think it'll be a problem, what I'm going to do is the equivalent of facing it in that distance. I was thinking that way, instead of the tool pressure being like that when I'm cutting, the tool pressure is going to be pressing inwards, so it should be a lot more rigid. So let's go and see about getting set up in the lathe. Now then, before we get across to the lathe, you may remember I've been having some problems with a rather basic piece of workshop equipment, so much so that Charlie Prescott even mentioned it on his auto website. And by the way, Charlie, hope you're feeling better and that all your health problems are resolved. So anyway, what was it that I was having the problems with? Ta-da! Thanks to Steam Shop Dave, I now have a nice vise that actually works and will grip things. Dave has everything. A positive cornucopia, his workshop. So a bit of cleaning up, bit of paint. There we go. A slight aside. Thanks again, Dave. Now, here we've got our disc in the lathe. We're going to run this at a nice slow speed, and I actually lashed out and bought a carbide tool that's supposedly for stainless steel. So as I say, this is 11.7. We want it down to 10.4. So that's 1.3. So that's 650 from each side. 650, 650, 1300. As I mentioned, what I'm going to do is, rather than turning it and putting the pressure, the tool pressure there, I'm going to face it so the tool pressure is going in right against the stops. I think that will help. Then again, it might not. So here we are, we're at the edge, and we want to go
in 650. There's 200, 400, 650. So I'm just going to put a mark so that I know where we are. Right, well, this is a bit out of true, but I'm not worried because, as I say, experiments. If this works, I'll get myself a new disc and we'll be all right. Okay, so let's see about turning this down. And as per usual, as we're not a machining channel, I will do this off camera. Now there it is, turned down, mounted on the centre hub again. It was only a couple of thou out on the face, so I just skimmed it those couple of thou. The back face was fine. It's got little lines on, but you can't even feel them. But as I said, this is just to check that everything's going to fit. So I've mounted it on the web. I put four of the 8 bolts in just to make sure it's in there nice and firm. So now I'm going to put it on the wheel and then we'll put the wheel in. Now I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to see this, but here we have the mounting, and as I mentioned earlier, there's quite a lot that actually sticks out away from the where it's attached to the fork. Now when I put this caliper on, there we go. I can't even see myself here. That's about right. You can see that to get the caliper on there, about centered, we're almost the thickness of this that it needs to be in there. So I will get it lined up better and measure that, and that's how much we're going to mill off there. Here I've got the fork clamped down on the mill. You could of course do this with a hacksaw and file and just be very careful measuring each one to make sure you take the same amount of each. But, you know, paid enough for this bloody thing, I might as well use it. So anyway, I've got it clamped down here on a spacing piece to lift it clear. And I know this spacing piece here, it's nice and wide and it's dead square. And then back here I've got some packing under here to raise this up, and then it's clamped down nice and tight, so that's not going to go anywhere. Now then, let me zoom you in. We've got about, well actually there's 1 thou travel, but it's 0 over 1. and it's 0 over the other. Oh, well, about a quarter of a thou. So I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to check just to make sure that it's the same side to side. Make sure it's level side to side. So let's take that out. Okay, that's good. So we're level this way and we're level that way, so we can mill it. So let me get these measuring tools out the way. So we'll touch off, and then we're going to take 300 thou off each of those. So we've got the fork back in, mudguard on, wheel in. So let's see what happens here. I have to shorten these bolts a little bit, I forgot about that, so I just put some washers on for the time being. That's gone on. And that's gone on. Oh, we're catching. We are catching because we're closer into the fork. Da, 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 da. Because we're closer into the fork, this piece here is just catching on there as we go in. So let me go and just grind a fraction off that. I don't think it'll be much, and then I'll be back. Right, there's our little bit taken off there. So now, there. Yeah, now they're tightened up better. All I had to do was, as Arkwright used to say, just jiggle it a bit. Alright, now then, big test. Will the wheel turn? Hey! Alright. So there we go with that. We're going to put our brake line in. But there we go. Front brake all done. That looks about right to me, as if that'll move over and everything will be good. Excellent. Alright people. I think it's time for Newcastle Brown. So go and get one if you've got one, and if not, just enjoy yourselves.